Folks, this is Kyle Loomis from E2C Network. Talks Auburn athletics, Auburn culture, Auburn community, and lucky for us, of course, Auburn football.
Lots of it.
This recruiting run, I have been checking this by the day, practically. I know I'm exaggerating slightly, but within the last couple of weeks, and it seems like, oh, another top 50 player, another top 50 player. There's a top 100 player. What is going on?
I'll tell you what's going on Big Cat Weekend. It has been something that has been around for a while, and I believe I'm correct in saying this has started with Gene Chizik, was carried on through Malzahn. What Harsin did with it, nobody knows, and obviously Hugh Freeze brought it back in a sense, or at least brought it back to prominence, and boy, has he done that. We are talking about 6 commitments on the actual weekend, which was the previous weekend, not even this last weekend. And then what has carried over since then, I guess we're now at 4 more commitments with a possible 5th one out after that weekend coming along. So if let me just be honest with you, Mark, I'm pretty good at memorizing these things because I talk about it a lot. I have a list up over here to my right now because I'm having to reference this to keep up with everything because I'm going to forget something. I mean, we're talking about commits in 2026. Obviously, the 2025 class, the most important one at the time. It's the most prominent cycle right now, the most timely cycle. But we are getting people on the defensive front. We are getting specialists. Offensive guys are coming in too. It has been incredible. And I was told by somebody on one of my live streams, some of the experts are predicting on the weekend 5 commits, maybe a 6. And I said, look, I can see 5, maybe, between that weekend to the following week as things carry over and people make their decisions after they leave, but not 5 to 6 on the weekend. What did we get? 6 on the weekend. And then 3 more that week. A 4th one just happened recently yesterday. And now we're sitting here waiting for a potential another one that's being hinted at a lot. Some major recruiting analysts are predicting there will be a flip from Notre Dame to Auburn. Whether that happens, anybody's guess at this point, but it sure seems likely. And the way the momentum is going with Big Cat Weekend, I guess I just need to stop doubting at this point.
The last time that Auburn had a good football season, in my evaluation, 2019, they had a decent season, top 15 team, 9-4, lost the bowl game. A really good season, up to Auburn standards. I'd go to 2017, of course, with the 2 huge wins in November, the SEC championship game appearance. So a lot of critics, of course, in the era that we find ourselves would say, well, why is Auburn getting all these? They've been under 500 for 3 straight years. Why are they getting all these top recruits? They must be paying them. Well, first of all, we've got to remind everyone that's above board. That's fine.
We're good. Sorry.
Now, but also Auburn's never not recruited in the top 10 to 15 in the country, and more so in the top 10 when they've had stability.
Right.
And maybe they finally still have that at this point, have stability. And so I think in talking to college football fans, as I do from all over the country on a daily basis, we've lost track of how Auburn is supposed to be run and what type of talent is acquired and how good this program is historically.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of goes back to this, Mark. I get asked a lot, and I'm sure you do as well. What's your prediction for this season? What's your prediction this season? And I haven't given my official season prediction yet, but relating it to this recruiting conversation, I always say my operating procedure is Auburn at a bare minimum is capable of 8-4 every single year. Just historically, just the talent that they're able to bring in, as you can see right here, even having several seasons of below par, what we expect. Auburn just for some reason is able to convince these kids, no matter who the coach is, what the system of offense or defense there, we just historically are able to stay in the picture, even if we're a little bit further out of it. So yes, I get it's weird for everybody to look and see Auburn's just piling in the recruits right now in 2025 and 2026. But this is a lot of effort and work that's been put in by Coach Hugh Freeze. This is one of the things that he was using to sell himself for coming to take this Auburn job is his ability to recruit. He did it at Ole Miss. He, has done it at other places, and he's obviously doing that here now. As you just brought up with the comment, the #1 class currently in 2026. And while rankings really don't matter in the grand scheme of things, that is still a really cool thing to talk about. We're talking about a team that has yet to have, in the last 3 seasons, a winning record. Make that make sense for me. That just doesn't make sense at all. But in some ways it does if you know the history of Auburn and how they, like you said, they've been able to stay within that top 15, top 20 range in whatever recruiting site that you're looking at with who they're able to pull in. It's just, we've got some good things to sell at Auburn, even outside of who the coach is. And when you have a coach that does their job at recruiting, it's an amazing thing what can happen.
Top 15 to 20 when they're down.
Yeah,
Folks
top one
might be a little surprised if they backtrack through the years how many top 10 classes Auburn has pulled in.
Yes, it can be surprising if you go back and look at the history. Auburn's just done a really good job. And historically, too, if you go back, you'll find some years, maybe even under Tommy Tuberville, where the classes weren't all that great, but he was so good at finding diamonds in the rough, these 3 stars, so to speak, that he turned into 5 stars by the end of time of his coaching time here. So even on those years where you didn't have necessarily the hype of a recruiting ranking, you had a lot of guys being found and that were being looked over and turned into 5 stars by the time they left, which is what I always stress. It doesn't matter as much as what they come in with as what they leave with. And I know that's not the fun way to think about it or talk about it, but it's just the reality of the situation. And you've got the list pulled up here of just some of the guys: Jared Smith, Derek Smith, we're just pulling in Smiths left and right. That's some of the new guys that have just signed on. I can give you the full list if you want it, of the ones that have come on through Big Cat.
Absolutely.
All right, let's roll through it. I got to look over here on my cheat sheet because, like I said, it's been a minute. Edge rusher. This is starting from the beginning of Big Cat Weekend to where we are at currently at the time of us doing this live stream. 2026 edge rusher Hezekiah Harris. 2026 linebacker Shadarius Tootle, best name ever. 2026 Jamichael Garrett, linebacker out of Alabama. 2025 now. We're going to get some more of those here. Blake Woodby. That's one that's was waiting. A lot of people thought that one was already going to come along sooner than it did. My estimation is they told him hold off on the public commitment and let's utilize it for part of this hype of Big Cat Weekend. Defensive back for 2025. 2025 defensive lineman Antonio Coleman, who is the triple flip at this point. That was pretty exciting to see as well. Punter. I know a lot of people don't get excited about that, but we do at Auburn because we've got some pretty good specialists in our history. John McGuire for 2025. 2025 athlete Derek Smith, who we just mentioned. 2025 defensive back Anquan Fagans. And then we've also got Jared Smith out of 2025, who we also just mentioned. And just yesterday, Wayne Henry for 2026, a defensive back. So that's your list as of this point. There's a couple of cool storylines within this. Obviously, the flip of Antonio Coleman within this class, 2026 and 2025. You're starting to see a very odd pipeline develop for Auburn. From Maryland, St. Francis Academy. This is 3 now that they have either in the 2025 or the 2026 class. It's the weirdest thing ever. I can't explain it. There's always one state that Auburn seems to go into and just start snagging people out of. For a longest time, it was Arkansas, which isn't the weirdest thing to do for Auburn because it's technically the Southeast. But Maryland, that's just weird. That's a really thing. But you think back to DJ Durkin's time up there, I'm sure he's got some connections, and that may be what's happening there. But that's your full list. I mean, we can talk about it at a lot of different angles, but it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, DJ Durkin brought in really good recruiting classes in Maryland when he was there, much better than they had experienced prior to his arrival. Folks, look at this. You've got just in the last week, the #1 player in the class who is a top 20 player, Jared Smith, off the edge in the state of Alabama. #2 at his position. You've got Caleb Falk. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, and that is the little brother of Keldrick Falk, who is our rising star defensive end at Auburn. Yep.
Another top 50 player. I'm counting 8 top 100 players. Not that there aren't really good players outside the top 100. So if you see 128, I just stop counting it. 8 in the top 100. And again, just here in the last less than 2 months, Eric Winters, top 50 player roughly. And then you got Derek Smith, who we talked about, the wide receiver, who's number 2 at the wide receiver position.
Yep, and this is a flip from Alabama as well. So I think that's some of the things that you get excited just about the sheer numbers of people that are committing, but there's some pretty cool storylines such as the flip. So you had an Antonio Coleman flip, the triple flip now at this point, and then Derek Smith, who is also a flip from Alabama. So that the fact that here's the biggest thing: if you go look at the 2025 state of Alabama rankings, depending on where you go, you're going to see some variation. But I believe this site and this company that you have pulled up right now, you will find that Auburn has 8 of the 10 top 10 players out of the state of Alabama. Guess how many Alabama has in that site? 0. Explain that to me. Ohio State has the other 2. And there's some people convinced that we're just going to flip them 2 and sweep the top 10.
Yeah.
I'm not part of that group necessarily yet, but I guess, as I told you, I just need to stop doubting.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised by that because Ohio State, while having a great track record of going to, let's say, Florida in particular, it is difficult for them as being the one kind of entry from the north to be able to make those kind of overtures and get to the south. They do lose a lot of them that they initially get because of the distance and because players get talked back into, hey, stay home.
Right.
Yeah, it's rather astounding. And another point to extend on being able to retain the state of Alabama would be the football level in the state of Alabama just continues to. So I don't think nationally people think of Alabama as being a great football state from the standpoint of fan interest and, of course, the 2 great schools, but not at the high school level. But man, if you look at the players in the state of Alabama, it has eclipsed a lot of other what are considered traditionally better football playing states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, states like that. Alabama has just completely blown them away.
Yeah, and if you look at it, you're going to find 2 states that have a lot of talent come out of them, Georgia and Florida, which are 2 of Auburn's most important states to recruit out of in every single recruiting cycle they do. I think sometimes that gets overshadowed a little bit because you're right there next to them. And then we talk about just the national picture, your Ohio's, your Texas's, obviously, that get a lot of the attention in terms of where the major recruits are coming from in terms of numbers. Alabama high school football is pretty dang good, folks. I mean, if you've ever watched MTV, you probably saw the Hoover Dynasty that was built, the show that they did that called Two-A-Days, I think is what it was called. I don't know how Hoover's doing much these days. I think they're still relevant, but not to the dominance they were. The state of Alabama is pretty good at football, college, high school. We know a little ball. And I mean, that's just how it is. And the bar, as you kind of started off saying, is continuing to be raised on the college level. Alabama's success, as much as it pains me to admit it. And then Auburn is, trying to get back up to, but keep pace with that as well. It just continues to bring each other up because I think that's what makes it such a great rivalry, what makes it a great interest point in college football too.
Auburn and just about everyone else across the nation has been in camp just about a week right now. I'm guessing that there hasn't been too much that's come out of camp at this point, but anything in particular?
Yeah, obviously, it's just the excitement of camp, it being back, that gets everybody super excited about this. There's a couple points I can bring up from the first, we'll call it week. It'll technically be a week on Thursday that they started, but essentially we played or at least been through the first week. Right now, in terms of injuries, knock on wood, at this point, we appear to be pretty solid. There has been the storyline where Brian Battie, who was involved in that gun violence incident, obviously he will not be available this year. And we've also had Tyler Scott, who's had an injury earlier in the summer that's as defensive back that was in the depth chart that was going to be out. But other than really Alex McPherson, our kicker, who's been dealing with a gastrointestinal issue, which sounds really weird, that would keep you sidelined. But I can promise you, folks, it's serious, not serious, I shouldn't say that, but a legit problem. He seems to be on the mend and heading towards being back and available at some point, just no timeline on that. One offensive tackle that was just a little bit banged up and had to be limited in practice for the first 2 days. But obviously, when you start going around hitting each other in pads, they're going to get bumps and bruises. But I feel like for some reason, this is the first practice in quite some time, fall practice that started, where we haven't had a major injury to note at the very beginning of it that hasn't already been addressed. So I think we're pretty healthy. The other thing is Cam Coleman. I don't know if you've seen this picture floating around, Mark, but I've been trying my hardest to get people to not just lump so much pressure on this wide receiver, this phenom, but he's not helping himself in that regard in terms of me or helping me make that case. His teammates are starting to hype him up. We posted a quote from his teammate Austin Keys that described him as "dude's got bunnies," which obviously means he can get up really high. And then now the media team at Auburn is just starting to just build the hype train. And they posted a picture of just him going up and getting like a one-handed high in the air grab. And the dude seems legit. It's hard to deny it at this point that he's going to start. It's hard to deny it that we're probably looking, if he stays healthy, if everything tracks, at the next great Auburn wide receiver.
Kyle Loomis, E2C Network for everything Auburn. We, of course, care about the football, but Auburn community, culture, athletics across the board. Kyle, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me. War Eagle.